Hello folks, and welcome to another video. In this one, I'm going to be having a little look at Yvette Cooper's pledge to crack down on hateful beliefs. Now, in its sort of purest form, hateful beliefs sounds like a fair thing to crack down on, doesn't it? But of course, like anything with a broad term such as hateful beliefs, it will be used to attack ordinary people. So she's going to crack down on people pushing harmful and hateful beliefs and kickstart a new approach to fighting extremism. So at this early stage here, it doesn't say who they're targeting, but it does seem to be somewhat of a two-tier policing approach, not just from Keir Starmer. I won't say it was just from him, because it also seems to have been the case under the Tories as well. It appears to be the case that if BLM or some feminist movement or something like along those lines, Antifa type people are out knocking down statues and calling Winston Churchill a racist and graffitiing, that's okay. But as soon as a bunch of white people go out into the street and start doing the same thing, which I'm not saying is right, you know, burning cars and such like is not right, and I don't think that gets the point across. I think there's people that are out protesting with a genuine want to actually, protest against what I think is a fairly real issue, and that is unchecked immigration. Now, according to this, me saying unchecked immigration is an issue could be considered pushing harmful or hateful beliefs. See, in the UK, we do things in a polite and kind of nice way like this. In China, they're quite obvious, and they say, you pushing this stuff, we're going to arrest you. If you say anything we don't like, we're going to arrest you. We pretend that, it's a rapid sprint to drive a new practical approach to countering extremism. Extremism is a sort of big term, really. For me, extremism would be, for example, people saying all Muslims should have very horrible things done to them, or Muslims saying all other religions should have horrible things done to them. That would be what I would say I consider extremism. But I get the feeling this lovely lady here with the short hair and, the usual stuff there, she is probably going to be attacking us white people, especially white males, because for some reason we are seen as the problem to everything. If there's a problem, it's our fault. So it's a counter-extremism strategy across the UK. It will look across the ideological spectrum. So in theory, it should look across the left and the right of ideological spectrums, including varying levels of religious activity, which may or may not contribute towards criminal behaviour, such as the stabbing of 3 young girls in Southport. Now, that one man has killed 3 young girls who will never go on to do anything now. I mean, for all we know, one of those young girls could have cured cancer. But we'll never see that because their lives were taken. Now, 460 people have been arrested and brought before the magistrates' court and charged for, let's call it, riotous protesting. Now, there seems to be a big push by Keir Starmer and this Yvette Cooper to deal with these nasty people who are out rioting and whatnot. And I will say it is not right to go out and riot and smash things up and whatnot. I don't think that solves anything. It certainly hasn't solved racism being potentially still an issue in society, although I do think it's a much smaller issue than is propagated by some people. But BLM's actions have actually made it worse, and I would argue that perhaps these people's actions have made Muslim relations and whatnot worse. But the push to illustrate that they are dealing with these people has been largely overshadowed by what are they doing about the young gentleman who murdered 3 little girls with a knife. I can't even imagine what they must have gone through and what their families are going through now. Are we going to be dealing with this person's family? I mean, are we going to be looking into them as to what they have done, how they've raised him and whatnot that has caused him to do this? Perhaps they've done nothing wrong. Perhaps he's just one of those people who was always going to do something like that. But nothing is being said about what's being done about them. And this is why people are talking about two-tier policing and not trusting in what women like her and men like Keir Starmer are putting out. They very much are focusing on what to do about the nasty white people protesting in the streets. And also, for example, sending a grossly offensive message. Now, of course, that is entirely subjective. To someone who, for example, has been in the army and whatnot, a grossly offensive message would be very different to someone who's just worked in an office, sat behind a desk in an air-conditioned room, never really having to deal with any kind of hardship or difficulty, except maybe a customer getting a bit grumpy because you couldn't process their insurance claim. So, again, this is the kind of thing the Chinese government do, which is put out statements about, for example, publishing written material to stir up racial hatred. So obviously I would take that as saying, for example, someone would say, oh, we must deal with all of these Muslims, although Muslim is not a race. If they said, we must do something about all these Arabs, and they list what they want done, and perhaps I would say, yes, that would meet that material. But also, people protesting in the streets shouting Allahu Akbar and wishing harm on white people, should that not also be caught up in that? If you find other groups are saying, for example, we need to get rid of these white people out of the streets, we don't want them here, we've taken over this place, shouldn't that be a grossly offensive message, or does it only apply to us as white people? It feels like a very two-tier thing. So she is right. Government has failed to address the rise in extremism. But I think the real rise in extremism has come from the left and from religions that have vastly different ideologies to ours and that are incompatible largely with the way the Western world functions. And yes, there has been a rise in extreme right, but that has been a rise to counter the damage coming from the left and from hateful religious ideologies aimed at harming the British people who've taken these people in quite often. So it has been hollowed out. I will agree with that, and it does cause all sorts of fractures and whatnot in our democracy. So she says she wants to disrupt and divert people away from extremist views. Now, of course, monitor extremist trends. Does that mean they'll be monitoring your Twitter, for example? If you posted something about, let's say, you discovered the race and background of someone who's committed an awful crime against 3 children, and you've posted that, is that an extremist view? Are they going to come after you for that, as they have done with a 53-year-old woman who is now facing 2 years in jail? What she posted, not very nice, I will admit that, and if you're going to post something like of that nature, I'll probably do it in a different way, but 2 years in prison for that? There's people literally robbing people in the street, getting virtually no sentence. But she's being sentenced for saying something nasty? Doesn't this feel like China? This doesn't feel like the UK anymore. This feels like we're being pushed into a sort of Chinese system here where we must be careful of everything we say because it could be considered to be extreme. And who decides what's extreme? Judges, perhaps a jury, but probably not. You could end up with a criminal record, even something as little as a caution, just for saying something that the Home Office don't like. Does that feel like Xi Jinping very much to you? Because it doesn't feel like the UK that I grew up in, that's for sure. We weren't allowed to say, of course, whatever we want, but would you be threatened with jail because your ideological beliefs don't match up with what they want you to believe? So perhaps we do need a better approach, but it needs to, only right down here, and now I know this is a newspaper article, only right down here does it say it will look at both the rise of Islamist and far-right extremism in the UK, as well as wider ideological trends, see that's the worrying bit, including extreme misogyny. Now, I as a man haven't really noticed extreme misogyny, or beliefs that fit into broader categories like fixation on violence. Again, I don't know how they're going to discover this, I suppose if you're posting stuff on Twitter, but extreme misogyny? I haven't met any men who meet this category. And what about extreme misandry? See, people forget about that word. There are women out there that have a real, true, vile hatred of men, and it's based on almost nothing. But that's left out. So you can see how it's a concern of two-tier policing, because you're already leaving out half the population. Apparently women don't post anything bad against men, only men posting against women. And what is extreme misogyny? See, these are very vague terms, and they're deliberately left vague because they're able to then attack you as someone if you say something they don't like. For example, like Tommy Robinson. I'm not saying I agree with everything he says, but if you say something they don't like, suddenly they're coming after you and they're locking you away. And this feels very much more like some Far Eastern country where the government decide what is free, the government decide what you can say, the government decide what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, and then they force you into that viewpoint. Now, perhaps you could say, well, just don't post it then. Just don't post it. Why do you have to post it? That is a fair point. You don't have to post anything. But is this the country we want to be living in? Is this the United Kingdom we want? A country where we're told, just don't post it. Don't air your beliefs. But meanwhile, other people are allowed to air their beliefs, or for example, up in Rotherham, are basically allowed to commit crimes against young people, and were not investigated for fear of being labelled racist. So even the police can't do their jobs, that's assuming they even wanted to. That doesn't feel like the UK to me. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please remember to give me a like. As much as it's hard to like a sort of dictatorship forming under Labour, it always forms under the socialists, doesn't it? Yes, they come in, they'll make everything better by telling you what you can and can't say, and by taking away elderly people's heating allowance so they can freeze to death in their homes. Socialism wins again, except it never ever does. Leave me a comment. I'm sure there's lots of you who would call me all sorts of nasty, horrible names because I've said, for example, that I don't believe in extreme versions of anything. Extreme feminism, no, not good. Extreme right-wing ideologies, not good. Extreme Muslims, extreme Christians, both not good. But apparently it's only bad when I call out half of those groups and not the others. And of course, share this video, because everyone needs to know about this. For example, everyone needs to understand how to word things online so that little old Yvette doesn't come after you with her Stasi trying to arrest you for daring to voice something that her and her Communist Party don't agree with. And of course, subscribe to my channel if you like more content like this. If you've watched right to this point, I'd like to say thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.